this is Joe Bolen, and welcome to learning about VisualBasic.net. Today we're going to look at the ComboBox control, and we're going to learn how to use the ComboBox control to present data to a user for a selection. Now, we can code the ComboBox in a number of different ways, but we're going to look especially at how to bring in data from a database and put it into our ComboBox control so we can use it to retrieve data. So we're going to work on creating a ComboBox load demo. So let's go to Visual Basic and learn about creating our project. Okay, I'm going to get started with a new project from Visual Basic. Clicking on the new project, I'm going to go to Visual Basic Classic Desktop, Windows Form, and we can use different framework levels. For this one, I'll use the 462, which is the current one I have installed on the system. And we're going to name this the ComboBox Load Demo. And I'm going to hit OK. And it'll create our form. Now, what I'm going to do, first of all, is rename the form to main form. Give it a little bit more description to it. And so I come down and hit rename and call it main form.vb. And I'm also going to change some of the characteristics. For example, the caption I'm going to change here using the text property. I'm going to call it ComboBox Load Demo. There's our text. Now, normally for a form, Windows form, Microsoft recommends a font of Seago UI 9 point. Well, for this demo, I'm going to make it a little bit different to make it a little easier to see for this particular demo. So I'm going to click on the font area to the ellipsis, and up will come the font dialog box. And what I'm going to change it to, I'll stay with Seago, so I'll type in the beginning of Seago UI. But instead of going with 9-point regular, I'm going to change it up to, let's go with a 14-point. Make it sort of large for this demonstration on it. So we're going to go with 14-point. Remember, there are 72 points to an inch, so we're using a fraction of that, 14/72 of an inch in our font size. Okay, we've got that set. You'll notice the form itself has changed a little bit in its dimensions. And I'm going to change that a little bit too. So I'm going to come back over here to the size of our form. In fact, I'm going to do a little sizing more like this. And that'll get us started. And we'll just let that be for now. And I'm going to hit a save right away before I go any further. So I'm hitting Save All button. And I'll just call it ComboBox Load Demo is the name and the solution name as well. And I'm going to create a directory for the solution inside of my projects folder. And I'm going to change that from design to projects. There we go. I'm going to hit save. And so I've saved that. And the little red dot that appeared above on the tab is now gone, indicating that particular part of the code has been saved. Okay, let's go to our area, and I want to talk about our toolbox. I'm going to pin it so it'll be a little bit easier to work with. And what I'm going to do is go to Common Controls. And I'm going to put on a couple of labels, the combo box, and then also a text box. So I'm going to put on a label here. And we're going to be a little lazy today. We're not going to name everything. We're just going to leave it its defaults. And I also need to have a text box. There we go. Now I'm going to change the size a little bit to make it easier to see on that. And also my text box, I'll make about the same size. Let me line it up a little bit. And there we go. Now the text box, I'm going to make read-only property. So I'm going to go to the properties area of the text box and change that text box property to a read-only tab stop setting. So we're going to read-only. get to the R, read only. I'm going to make it true. So it will not be for input of data, just for output. And then I'm going to go to tab stop true and turn it to false as well, because it will not be a place where things will stop. Now the labels themselves can't receive focus, so in a sense we don't need to worry about setting those. Now I am going to change the name of my label here, and we're not going to change the name itself. I'm just going to leave it label 1. I am going to change the text property here to say pick from. Put a colon there, and the second one will be the text property of value picked. There we go. Now I want to do a little alignment. I'm done with the toolbox now, and what I'm going to do here is slide this over a little bit so we can see things, and we're going to line up our information so it looks a little bit better there, and line that up as well. Get everything set. Grow out, outline all of them and sort of center it a little bit better on our form. And now I'm going to hit the save, and that little red dot will go away. Okay, so we have a ComboBox 1, a TextBox 1, and 2 labels, label 1 and label 2, that we've given text properties to. Okay, now we're going to look first of all at the ComboBox, just basically. And there's a smart GIF up here at the top I'm going to click on. And there are a number of things I can do here, one of which I can have edited items. So there is actually a collection that I can key in data, and you'll see I have now the string collection editor, and I can key in a number of items. For example, I can key in Joe, and Ted, and Steve there, and those items will go in my ComboBox. And if I just run this right now without doing anything more, those will be part of the data in my ComboBox. It's part of the collection. So let me go ahead and run this, and you'll see this. Okay, there's our ComboBox, and you'll see on the drop down that in fact we've got Joe, Ted, and Steve in there for our options. Well, we can hard code that in, as you saw me do, but we're going to bring it in from a database where we'll have a number of things. So let's make a change to that, and we'll see how that's done. Okay, we'll come back here. I first of all want to get rid of what I just put in there. So I'm going to go back to the edit collections item and clear this out. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is have a database. So I'm going to take a look at that database. I'm going to change the screen a little bit here. And what I'd like you to see, the database we're going to be working with is called the Simple DB that I have out there. So I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to go to View Server Explorer. And there's my Server Explorer. I'm going to add a new connection by clicking on the little Add Connection to Database icon. And it'll bring up my dialog for adding a connection. Now, I have it already set for Microsoft SQL Server as a SQL client, and that's what I want for this one. I'm going to be using Microsoft Server 2014 that I have on my system. And I'm going to be using the local server on my machine, so I can just hit the dot, and it's the SQL Express that I'm using. Now, it could be different for you, depending on what you're using. I'm going to be using Windows Authentication. And as I tab out of here, my names in the database will be generated. And I'm going to hit the drop down here, and there's our load. And I want to go with the Simple DB here for the database they'll be working with. And I'm going to test the connection, and I've got a good test. Okay, now just to show you something, we can hit on the Advanced button, and we can see the information about our connection. We can actually see the connection string here through here that we can highlight, Control-C to copy, and then use it in that way. Or I'm going to hit OK right now, and I'm going to go up here to the Server Explorer. And this time, I think I'm going to change things a little bit in terms of your viewing. And I'm going to right-click on this and show you that we also have the properties of this one. Get the properties for that database. I'm going to slide this over so you can see it. Here is also my connection string on that I'll be using through here. So I'm going to highlight this and select it all. So I'm going to copy this. And this will be how I connect to that database. So I've copied it by using a Control-C on that. Let me go back now. And what I'm going to be doing is modifying the app config file. And over here you'll see the app config file in my Solution Explorer. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to add an entry. So I'm going to come down here and add a new entry. And this one's going to be called connection strings. And there comes in connection strings on that. And I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to add to that section give a name, and the name of this one is going to be what I'm going to call the database, which is I'm going to just call this SimpleDB is the name of my connection I'm going to be creating, and I'm going to be adding the connection string. So connection string equals, and the connection string is going to be what we copied just a minute ago when we looked at the properties of that connection. So I'm going to use Control-V to paste it in. That's pasted in. I'm going to come right here, hit the Enter key, and come back and add also the provider name. And the provider name for this one is system.data.sql client. There we go. So we've got added into the app config file the section called connection strings. Now we can have a number of connection strings, but we only need one for this one. And we're giving it a name called SimpleDB. Then we have the actual connection string property in here where we laid it out. There's my connection string on that for you to see. And then the provider, which is System Data SQL client. Okay, I'm going to hit a save on that and then close out the app config file. And this will be where we will find the information as we process our program. Okay, I'm back to our program now. Let us now take a look at the database itself. So I'm going to go back here to the Server Explorer, and we're going to take a little look at our table that we're going to be working with. I'm going to be working with the contacts table, and you can see the different columns I have in the contacts table. But I also like to show you the definition because this is sort of a typical table. So I'm going to click on it and go to Open Table Definition, and it'll generate that in a second. And there is our table definition coming in. And I would like you to see that not only the field names that I have here, but also the fact that the contact ID is an integer field. This is the primary key for this one. You'll see the little key there. And it allow nulls is not checked. It has to be specified. Now we'll also see that this is a down below here an identity field, which means that it will generate automatically the numbers that go in there starting from 1 and incrementing by 1 on that. So we have the property of it being a identity field. In Microsoft Access, we call that the auto number field. Now, the other one that I would like to draw your attention to is the last name field. And I'm not allowing any nulls for that. You must fill in the last name. But I'd like you to take a look at the rest of the fields. They are all going to allow null entries, which means they don't have to have data in there. And we have to watch how we process that when we deal with fields that are null values. And we'll talk about that as we get into the program itself. But this would be typical of a table that you might be working with. You'd have a primary key, maybe one or two or more fields that require data to be put into it, and others that are allow nulls, and we have to treat those special. Okay, let's go back now, and I'm done with looking at this in itself. I do have data there, and we'll see that in a minute. So I'm going to close out my Server Explorer, come back, and begin to work on the code itself. So I'm going to save everything right now. And I'm going to right-click on my desktop here and go to View Code. And we see Main Form appearing. And I'm going to, first of all, start out by coming above it and entering in a couple of import statements. It's going to make it easier for me to work with the code as I process. So I'm importing imports system configuration, and also imports system.data.sql client. Okay, right now they're grayed out because we don't have anything in there. I also want to come over to my Solution Explorer, and in my Solution Explorer under References, I'm going to highlight that and add system configuration, which is not in there. So I'm going to add a reference to system configuration, and I'll come up to the framework area, and I'll scroll down, and we'll see system configuration right there. I'm going to click on that and say OK. Now, system configuration will allow me to go easily against the app config file that we work with to put our connection string in, so we can retrieve that data out as we process. Okay, and I'm going to do a save all again, keep everything saved. Now let's begin by looking at our form itself. So let's come back to our form. What I'm going to do is load up this ComboBox at runtime, but at the very beginning, called the load area of our presenting this form. So I'm going to highlight the form on this. Now I can come over to my event area of the form, and you'll see the load event is one of the events that I can click on, and that will create my load event. Or I can just double click on the form, since this is the default event. So I'm going to just double click on the form, and I'll create the load event. And so when this code first fires up, the load event creates. I'm going to clean this up a little bit with a continuation mark and bring it down. And what I'm going to do is have a procedure that I'm going to run. It's called load ComboBox. And I do not have that written yet, so it's going to be highlighted in red until I write the code for that. And so I'm going to now write that code. So what I'm going to do is come down in my code and create a private sub load ComboBox. Get that spelled right. And that will cause my little red lines to go away on my area up here in the load. And when we go into load, we'll then come down and do the procedures to load the ComboBox. So what I'm going to do is define a few things first. And by declaring it, I'll say dim. I'm going to make a field name called query. And this is going to be as string. And it's going to be equal to and we're going to put in select, and my fields that I want to get for my combo box are only two of them. I want to get the contact ID that I had, which was the primary key, and I also want to get the combination of first name and last name. So I'm going to say last name, and I'm going to make it an expression here, and I'm going to put in a comma, the space, and first name, and I'm going to say this is as full name. Okay, now there is something we're going to adjust here in a second. I'll tell you about it after I get this part finished. On that, I'm going to ampersand here to come on down to the next line. And now I'm going to add in from, and my table was contacts. And I want to also have this come in sorted. So I'm going to say order by, and I'm going to order by last name, first name. Okay, so what we're going to be getting is, this is our query statement to go against our database to retrieve back the contact ID and also retrieve back the combination of last name and first name, and we're going to call it full name. Now, there is a problem though. We can have a situation where I have a null for first name. So I'm going to modify this for an SQL database. It's a little bit different for a Microsoft database and some others. So I'm going to say is null on this one. So it is null first name. And if I don't have a null, I'll use first name. Otherwise, I'm going to provide it with the empty string. So I'm going to put two apostrophes there, and that will return. So no matter what, if this is null, I will at least get an empty string to build up my full name in here. So that's why I'm using isNull function there. Okay, then I also need to have declared a data table. I'm going to just call it DT as new data table. And that new keyword will instantiate the data table, and so we'll have that available to us. Then I'm going to begin to try to get my data, and you'll see it created my try catch block. And what I'm going to do is inside the try block actually do the connection. So what I'm going to do is, I want to have one other thing here. I didn't do it. Go ahead, dim connection as string, and that string is going to be configuration manager, configuration manager dot connection string, and maybe not spelling that quite right. Yeah, I got a little spelling error there. Configuration manager connection string, and the name of the connection string that I have out there is simple DB, and it's going to be as a connection string. So period connection string. There we go. So this will allow me to go out, find the connection string called simple DB, which we have in our app config file. There's our simple DB. So it's going to find this name, pick up the connection string, and return it back to our variable that we've declared. Okay, so I've got the connection, the query, the data table made, now we're ready to define our actual SQL command. So I'm going to say using CON as new SQL command connection, and then my connection is going to be my CONN. Okay. And the end using will kick in. Once again, I have to spell correctly. There we go. SQL connection, that's spelled right. Well, we'll see it here in a minute here. And then using CMD as new SQL command. Oh, I see where I made a problem. Up here in my import statement, I got two S's. There we go. There we go. Client or command. There we go. New SQL command. My SQL command will be my query and my connection. There we go. And then I'm going to open my connection. Open. And then I'm going to use a reader. Let me just call it RDR as SQL data reader. There we go. And it's going to be equal to the command of execute reader. There we go. And within that, then I'm going to take the data table, load the reader, RDR. There we go. Get that back. Now, the reason I'm using the using keyword is this will allow me to instantiate the different parts of my retrieving data, and then once it gets outside the scope of the using area, it'll automatically close and dispose of the things I'm working with. So real quickly, I'm taking care of taking the connection, the command, and the reader and disposing it as I come to the end using statements. Now we could have a problem, so I'm going to make a very generic catch here of throwing the exception back. There we go. So there's our throw exception. Okay, let me come on down now. And what I'm going to do then is take my data that I now have in the data table using the reader. I'm going to work with ComboBox. So I'm going to say with ComboBox 1 I'm going to set some of its properties. The data source I'm going to set equal to the data table that I have with its data now in there. And my display member is going to be the full name that I have up here. So I'll display the full name as last name, first name. Okay. And I'm going to have also a valued member. In this case, I want to have the valued member being my contact ID. Okay. Now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the ComboBox's index to -1. So I'm going to do select index, and we're going to set it to -1. And that way it won't show with any names in it when we first appear. Okay. Now I'm going to do something in a minute right at this point, but I'm going to hold off till I create the next part of it. and that is when I'm working with the ComboBox itself. So let's come back to our main form, and I'm going to save everything first. Let's come back here. Now our ComboBox itself has a default event, and we can come over here and take a look at that by clicking on the little lightning bolt, and you'll see the event that it has, stretch that out, is the SelectedIndexChanged event on that. So I can double click on this or click over here to create that. I'm going to quickly just create it here by double clicking on it. And we now have our ComboBox SelectedIndexChanged event, which handles our event of the ComboBox 1 SelectedIndexChanged on that. Now what we want to have happen when the index changes is we want to put something into the text box that we have out there. So what I'm going to be doing is saying if ComboBox 1, let me get my, there we go, ComboBox 1 selected index is not equal to -1, then I want to process it. Now, if it's equal to -1, I want to skip over this routine and it'll jump on down and exit out. And you'll remember back up here, when we started out, we initialized it to -1, so it should skip out of here. So what I want to do in this case is take TextBox 1, text, take the text property of that, and I'm going to assign it the value of what I've selected in the combo box. In this case, I'm going to go ComboBox dot get item text. Now I could do this also with getting the selected item and converting it. It comes in as an object, and I convert it to a text, to a string property, but this does it automatically for me. So I'm going to get item text, and I'm going to get the item text of the ComboBox 1, and I'm going to get it at the selected item level. Okay, selected item. There we go. So this, when I have an item selected in my combo box, this value will now have something other than -1. It'll come down here with this index location of the selected item, retrieve the text property as a string, and assign it to our text box 1 on that. Now, after I get done doing that, I want to then erase what I've selected. So what I'm going to do is set the ComboBox 1 index back to -1. So ComboBox 1 selected index. I'm going to reset it to -1. Whoops, not equal 1, -1. There we go. So we're coming through. We have the values. Now, if everything goes correctly in our selection, we'll have a contact ID for the valued member, and our full name will be there for the displayed member. Now, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about this as we get into it, but this will take care of it. The important thing to realize is I'm using a very fast way to approach this. Now, I could also use a table adapter, or if I wanted to, I could create a data set and a table and all that, but that's actually a lot of overhead to process this simple application area to retrieve data. And we want to retrieve it the fastest we can, and using the data reader is the fastest way to read in data from a table in a database. And we can then put that data right into a data table and process the information in that data table. So this is a quick way to anytime we want to use a data reader to process data, this would be the type of code you would use. Okay, well, let's see if our code works. Let's see if we get our data from the database. Remember, our configuration manager is going to go out and get that connection string, and then it's going to be applied here as we create the SQL connection itself. Okay, let's save all. Let me make the screen bigger for you, and let me hit start, compile, and run in debug mode. There is our pick from. Let's hit the drop down and see if it works. In fact, we already have Amy Jo, and that's the problem. I'm going to show you how to fix that. So I'm going to come down here and hit myself, and there it is coming through. I'll hit Kathy Cunningham, and there she comes through. And you see we've also, by using the expression in our SQL select statement, we've put the last name and first name together. Now I want you to show you I've got one out there that doesn't have a first name, and that's where I had the is null. I'm going to come down here to nothing, and nothing is the last name only. So that's what we get there. So it works just the way we need it to work. Now, the one thing I wanted you to see though is when I started out, I automatically picked up the first record, and I don't want that to happen. I'll show you how to solve that. So let me stop this, and let's go back to our code. And what's happening is while we set the value of the selected index to -1, actually it fired off when we first began the program, and it came in with a index of 0, which is its default, and fired off getting that first record. Now what we're going to do is take a look at this event here, and this is the event we're looking at. I'm going to copy that real quickly on that, and what I want to do here is do a special thing, and then we'll change things. We're going to add a handler, and the handler is going to handle the event that we're working with. So I'm going to paste in the event, and then I want it to run address of, and then I want it to run this particular procedure. So I'm going to copy this, hit copy, and paste that in. Okay, at this point I'm going to take the underscore handles part out of my procedure and let this one take care of it. So this time when it becomes active, it won't become active to handle any kind of event until it reaches the add handler. At that point in time, our select index is -1, and it won't have anything here, and it'll jump over this section. So let's see this work. If I did everything right, we won't have anything show up on our text box, which is what we want. We don't want Amy Jo to pop in until we select Amy Jo, and now I select it, and it'll pop in fine. Okay, so there's how you take care of loading things from a database. You create a simple SQL data reader approach to getting your data. You only are going to be loading up 1 or 2 values, in the sense that, let me come back to our code. We're going to be using just a display member without the valued member, or we're going to use both. Now, the only reason I put in the valued member is I'm going to show you another program in a second where we're going to take advantage of that valued member. Remember, this is the primary key to that particular area of our table. So if I pick Amy Jo, her record ID number will come in, and I want to get the rest of the data for Amy Jo. So this is our code right now that we have on that. Remember, we had our import statements, system configuration, and system data SQL client. We added the reference to our area over here to use the system configuration, which didn't come in automatically. We had to add that into our program. And then we took advantage of our connection configuration manager to get the connection string. Our query picked up only the 2. A lot of times people will put an asterisk here and get all the data. Well, that's wasted time. It's also overhead. We only want to get just the fields necessary for a combo box. Remember, our database could have thousands of records, and we only want to get just enough that we can get into our computer's memory to display. So I'm just getting basically the full name and that contact ID brought in. I'm using the SQL data reader because it's faster than using a adapter or using the full data set table approach to process. So the data reader is the fastest way to read in read-only kind of data. And once I have it in a data table that I've loaded, then I assign it to the data source on my ComboBox, making the full name, in this case here, the one that's displayed in the ComboBox, and the valued member being also part of that. So this is the quick way to do it. Remember, we don't want to use every field up here with an asterisk. We want to define exactly the fields that we want in our ComboBox. Okay, now let's take a look at this same program being a little bit cleaner. I will be taking the information about processing the data to a different area. I actually will have another project that I'll reference with all the data access layer occurring in a different part of the project, and only the presentation layer taking place in the part that we're used to seeing. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to close out our project real quick on that. So I'm going to say File, Close Solution. I'm going to open the one that I have that's a little bit more complex. So I'm going to go File. In fact, I can go here to Recent Projects, my Combo Load Demo Plus version. And there is my one. But I want to show you the code that's behind this. Okay, let's give you the code. And here we see the code. I've got a data access layer now. And you'll see in my Solution Explorer, I have a data access layer project area where I put in some information about my database. So my app config file is the same, but I also have a simple DB class out here. And this one's going to actually get the connection string. So I'm going to be doing it in that class on that. And then I have the contact DB class that has all the information about retrieving. So here is the area for the ComboBox, once again, that we're using, and I'm returning a data table back to the presentation layer. And then we're going to see also that I'm going to take advantage of going out there by contact ID, passing in the contact ID value, and I'm going to do an add with value of that ID to the contact ID up here. So I'm getting a where clause, getting only that one record, and then I'm returning back a data table that only has one record in it. So let's go back now and take a look at the main forms code, and we'll see that now it's a little bit simpler. When my load ComboBox, right away I've got, instead of the data table here, I'm going out and retrieving this, and I'm bringing back a data table once again, but I'm assigning it through this method. Everything the same through here. Then down in our ComboBox area, a little different. Here's our area where we brought in and got the information, but this time I want to show you I've added some code here, and this part is the part I've added new into this spot. What I'm doing now is getting that selected value, the contact ID, the valued member on that, and it comes in as an object, and I have to cast it back into, in this case, an integer. So I'm using C-type to cast it back into an integer, and then I'm assigning it to the ID integer that I've created here in my dimensioning. Then I'm calling a routine display the contact. Now this is a simple message box show type of display on that. So let's come down and take a look at how that's done. I come down here. I'm going to be using, once again, that ID, going out and getting the data table. In this case, the data table is going to have one record that I'm getting by ID. I'm creating a string builder group here because I'm going to be doing a lot of concatenation of strings, so the string builder is more efficient for this. Then I'm going to say for each row in data row in the data tables rows collection, on that I'm going to go process, and you'll see here that I bring in contact ID, then I get the row, where the row in this case is the contact ID row, convert it to string and write it to the string builder. Then I examine my first name, and I have to check to see if it's null. Remember we had null values? I can't reference a null value, so I have to say if you're not null, then you can go ahead and be referenced. But if you're not, you're going to skip right over this and go to the next one. Now, last name is a column that we did not allow any nulls, so I don't have to do the check there. But all the rest of the different columns in my table can be null values. So I have to do a check on each one as I build up the line. And you'll see even date of birth down here. I'm checking to see if it's null. And if it's not, then I'm converting it to a date time value on that. And I'm also making it a short date type on that by using the small d out here. And then I'm displaying my string builder to string value with the caption selected contact. So let's watch this one run. Okay, and compiling it, and there's our ComboBox. Made this a little bit smaller so it might be a little harder to read. Now I'm going to hit down, and I'm going to hit myself first. So I'm going to come down here to Joe Bolen, and my message box pops up, and my string builder is built up and then displayed. So you can see I'm using contact ID 3, Joe Bolen, a fictitious address, by the way, and fictitious phone number as well. So that displayed that information very quickly in a message box. Let's go to one where we have the birthday in there, Kathy Cunningham. And hers pops up, and you'll see that it came in, and we got the date of birth in there fine. Let's go to the one that had only the value of nothing. And I'm going to drop down and go for nothing. And you'll see that it built up only what it could get. In this case, it was the ID of 14 with the last name of nothing. So it took care of the DB null kinds of situations by examining it before it built up and referenced the values. So remember, if you're working with a table that can contain nulls, we do have to examine those columns before we reference them because we'll have an exception if we don't. If they do have a value, then we can reference them. If they don't, we have to skip over them. Or supply a empty string in place of what would normally be displayed. In this case, I'm just building up a simple message box string. Okay, let's go back and just once again review what I did in this code. Exactly the same as the first program we created. On that, we loaded the combo box. I got rid of my import statements. They're now in the other project. Now I'm just referencing the data access layer project to get everything. I'm coming in and getting a data table full of only first full name and contact ID. Putting that in my combo box. I'm then turning on the event ability with the add handler statement. Then coming down, and then if I change anything in the combo box, I'm going to put that text information into the text box, as well as I'm going to take that valued member, contact ID, which is now selected value, cast it back to an integer and put it in the ID field, and then process that by going out and getting the record display. So it's a very simple process, but remember, for working with null values, we do have to examine them for not being null before we reference them. So if you tried to go right ahead and reference this directly, you would get an error. You have to test it first to make certain that it's not a null. And if it's not a null, then you can reference it and display it or work with it any way you need to on that. In this case, we were just building a simple message box string, one big string. We use the string builder to do that. It's part of the system text string builder class on that. So we're using the append to build up all the different lines to our string that we're going to be displaying with the string builder toString method at the end in our message box. Okay, well, all this stuff can be found out at a spot. I'm going to go out and show you where you can get that. Let me cascade back up a little bit to my projects, and I should have a project called AA ComboBox Demo. Let me come back to it and bring up main form, and you'll see here I'm going to change the size a little bit so it's easier for you to see. We'll make it about a 200 point. This code that we work with today, that's a little bit too big. Make it 150 on that. The code we work with today is out at Pastebin.com under this URL. So you can see the code with all the comments on this code, so you can see how I did it. Now, I only have the basic program for this one, not the more involved one I showed where I actually built the string builder with the append method. I just have the basic one here, but you also see information here if you're working with like an Access or MySQL. I've got a link here too to know about the is null statement. This is for a Microsoft database. The TSQL language uses the is null function to do that. You'll have to see which one is appropriate for you if you're using this type of approach. But everything that we did is out there. You can see on that. Also, you'll see the use of the table adapter is another way. The table adapter actually has a little less in lines of code, but it's actually slower than doing the data reader. So I recommend using the data reader to get the speed. Remember, your database could have a lot of records out there. You might be processing it over a line, so that you want to cut down on your bandwidth usage. And by doing so, you want a quick stream, and the data reader is the best approach to go. So once again, your information about this program is out there at Pastebin.com at EM4NRNX6. So take a look at it, try out the code, get your hands dirty in the code. Remember that I went out to and did a data connection by using this Server Explorer and found my connection string. I used a Control-C to copy, and then when I went to my app config file, I then pasted that in for the connection string value. So we're using the app config file. We're not hard coding that kind of information in our code. A lot of times I've seen people code the connection string in the code. We don't want to do that. There's a number of reasons: security, flexibility as well. I can modify that app config file outside my compiled program because it is an XML file that I can go in with an editor and change very easily. So if my database gets relocated or it's on a different server, I can modify that connection string very easily. But if we hard code it in our program, then when we come to deploy that program, we're stuck with what we hard coded in our program, which may not be correct for the environment where we're installing it. So remember, we can load the ComboBox in a number of ways. We can key it in by going to the collection. You saw me go to the smart GIF of the ComboBox and actually key in values, or we can bring it in from a database, as you saw in this program. The important thing to remember is we have different ways we can load that up, and also it has its own default event, which is the selected item or selected index change event. It's the default event that we can then examine what the user has selected and retrieve the data from it. And in this case, you saw in the more advanced program, I retrieved back the value member that I had, which was the contact ID, went directly out and read only that one record in from the database, brought it into my program to display in a message box. So those are the kinds of things you need to keep in mind. Remember, we don't want to load the whole program with every record out there. We only want to get the things we need to process. So we want to keep things simple and select on that. Get your hands dirty in code. Try out this program. Pick one of your own databases or one of the Microsoft databases you can download to practice with, and load it up with some values and see how you can work with it. So until next time, take care and practice your combo box. Bye-bye.